A very, very good evening and welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, except it's not warm. It's not close to warm. If you happen to be up in Johannesburg, so far today, we've had 2 hailstorms. It's been drizzling and or raining all day. One stage it was 4 degrees. It has soared up to about 6 degrees. And this is the end of October. Oi, what is the world coming to? It means it's a very good day for a warming glass of wine. And luckily, on today's show, I have got the perfect quartet to deliver some of South Africa's not just best wine, some of South Africa's most exciting wine, and that is ahead of their wines being poured this Saturday at a rather cool event. I only found out about it this morning when one of our guests, Samantha Suddons, popped something up onto the Daryl Balfour, Angela Lloyd WhatsApp group, the one that generates 11% of all of South Africa's WhatsApps on a daily basis. Lucky to spot this one as it came through. There's an event happening this Saturday at Acid Wine Bar, which you'll know from previous footage on the show. A number of really cool producers coming together to light up the Johannesburg wine scene this weekend. So today we have 4 of the producers. Samantha, obviously one of them, with her Venom brand that we've had on the show before. We also have Kiara Scott from Brookdale, Tinashe Nyamudoka from Memento, and my second cousin on my mother's side, fellow Zimbabwean Tinashe Nyamudoka and his Kumusha wines, the star of Blind Ambition, all joining us on the show with an air of celebration still hanging happily over South Africa after a rather tense but ultimately delightful rugby result on Saturday night. I think many South Africans are still feeling a little hoarse. I'm probably one of them as we celebrate such a great win. And it's one we've made this point a number of times over the course of the last few weeks. It is rugby and it is wine that both do such a great job of flying the South African flag so high and so proudly right around the world. Springboks doing the job over the last 7 or 8 weeks. South African wine doing it every single day around the world, and so proudly so. And in fact, our guests this evening have all got a part in that. Their wines disappear across the planet, and we'll be talking about that as part of our conversation this evening. It was a very busy week last week. Kudos to Michael Frijon and the team at WineX. It was packed, it was successful. There was some great wine. If you missed it, we did the live show there from Wednesday. We also had the chance to do Thursday's show with the Robertson producers who brought together the Culcrete. Fascinating wine, the unwooded Chardonnay, 6 of them made, all in the same style, but all slight differences. And we got to try those with some of the producers last week. Last week was also the launch of the new Pinch of Salt from Groote Post. It was the launch of the 2018 Glenelly Lady May. There was the launch down in Elgin, which we hosted and did a live show with, of the new 7 Flags vintages, the 2020 Pinot Noir and 2022 Chardonnay from Paul Kluwer, and got to speak to Dr. Paul Kluwer. That's an interview coming up in the next couple of weeks. Fascinating man. He was a brain surgeon before deciding that wine was the way forward. And his son Paul Kluwer, who runs the estate now, also joined us together with winemaker Andries Berger. And that was a special live show on Friday, if you missed it. So busy week. This week slightly quieter, thankfully, although there is some very important stuff coming up, including on Thursday, the Art Angels auction, which is supported by a number of top wine estates, Anthony Rupert, Villa Fonte, Friars Cove amongst them. And there's also some wine to be drunk this weekend, but I'll tell you more about that on Thursday's show. Right now, before we go in to our 4 producers and the exciting and at times eclectic wine they are making, let's have a quick look at some wine news. Now, this is tomorrow evening, Villieira. Tom Orpin, you might remember Tom on the show before from his Warwick days. He's now moved across to join the French behemoth that has invested so enthusiastically in South African wine, with Villieira one of those. You'll see in shot the pearls of nectar. Nectar, especially in Johannesburg, is a category that is flying. And Villieira, such a strong name through Jeff Greer and the creation of Cup Classique, have joined the queue of people who are producing some really good versions of that sweeter style. Not everybody's preferred style, but it's certainly a popular one up in Johannesburg. It won't just be the nectar, though. There'll be a range of Villieira bubbles, and those are for tasting tomorrow evening. So if you are around, join the Norman Goodfellows team. That's down in 4 Ways tomorrow evening, head over to the Norman Goodfellows website. Small contribution, all of which goes to charity, and you get the canapes, you get the wine, and you get the Villera team talking you through some of South Africa's finer bubbles. Now, this was on Friday, referenced it a moment ago. You've got quite a collection of people there. Next to me is Darlene Fourie, who is the chief wine writer at News 24. Andries Berger, 27 years now. He has been at Paul Kluwer. His wine just gets better and better. Fiona MacDonald, editor of Wine Magazine, if you go back a few years, and still a very influential wine writer and wine judge. Paul Kluwer, the current vintage, who oversees the Paul Kluwer estate and property. And then Emile Joubert, whose blog is always a source of great entertainment and is one of the characters of South African wine. So that was on Friday down in Elgin. I think that wet weather got sent north. And there is Dr. Paul Kluwer, the original, the brain surgeon turned winemaker. They decided to make some wine, produce some grapes, a joint venture with Nederburg up in Elgin. And that is what kicked off not just the Paul Kluwer estate eventually, but also wine in Elgin. And it's now a region that's got some terrific producers making waves with certainly lots of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but a few other varietals as well. And it was that man in picture. He's a fascinating guy to chat to, who introduced wine to Elgin and gave us the Elgin wine region we know today. Dan really likes one charity auction. This is coming up in 2 weeks' time, Tuesday, the 14th of November. It's going to be at Strauss once again, and very excitingly so. And this has got, I think there are about 100 different producers who have come together, and I think there'll be a few more to be added before we are all done. And this is going to be the opportunity for us to do what we've done for the last 2 years, and that is sell not just wine, but also hospitality lots and wine experiences. And the money goes to 3 great causes. It goes to Reach for a Dream, and I sit on the exco for Reach for a Dream, so I know them particularly well. There is also the opportunity to support the Cape Winemakers Guild Trust, and Kiara, one of our guests today, will know that trust particularly well. And then also the Pinotage Youth Development Academy, we're going to be supporting. So it's a really, really cool collection of people, a really cool collection of items. If you would like to come along, tickets will be on sale from tomorrow through the Norman Goodfellows website. We don't have a huge number of them, but it's going to be happening in Johannesburg. It's going to be at Strauss & Co. If you come along, it's some great wine on the night, some food on the night, and then you're subjected to me for a couple of hours as we look to sell off the collection of wine that's been so kindly donated. And we do have some fabulous, fabulous donations. A big thank you to everybody who has supported us. I'll have some more detail for that later on in the week as well. Keep an eye on our social media pages. Okay, so this Saturday, Acid Wine Bar, one of the sprinkling of little wine bars that's popped up in Johannesburg over the last year or two, with a real focus on the different, on the interesting, on wine that's perhaps not quite so widely available or quite so well known. And that plugs our 4 producers into this show particularly well, because we've got 4 producers who've got a very definitive style, a very definitive signature. In the case of Kiara, groundbreaking young winemaker who at the age of just 27 became the head winemaker at Brookdale and has already carved out a very impressive reputation. The words and the feedback out of London from a visit earlier this year, I think, still ringing around the winemaking community of the greater UK. Samantha Suddons, absolutely unafraid to experiment and to have fun and to push the boundaries of wine, and we benefit from that as a result. Marlies Neerman, well, I think Tim Atkin put it best with his praise for early on this year. We'll talk to her about that in a moment. Her Memento wines, they're just fabulous. I'm a really, really big fan. And then my fellow Zimbabwean, Mr. Nyamudoka, the movie star who spends half his life traveling. I think there are 4 of them. There's not possible one man can do quite so much. So to all 4 of my guest guys, a warm welcome. Lovely to have you on Dan Really Likes Wine. And I think I need to kick off, Marlies, with some congratulations, because I haven't had the chance to have you on the show since you got a rather cool thumbs up from Mr. Atkins. Tell us about that and what that means to you as a winemaker.
Thank you very much. It's absolutely awesome. I think all of us work very hard, and to get some recognition always helps. And from Tim, who's traveled South Africa so many times, it's amazing. But I really do think there's so many young winemakers of the year that I think it's almost impossible just to choose one. But it's amazing to be this year's young winemaker, even though I turned 40 a week or like a month ago, so not that young anymore. But I think it's a fantastic opportunity and a platform to just get our wines out there now even stronger, just telling the story of South African wines. And yeah, Tim is so much invested in South Africa and in our wines, and he knows most of our wines very well, and also most of the winemakers. So fantastic opportunity and super chuffed.
The theme, the thread to today's show is the fact that all four of you are going to see your wines poured at acid for the Good Juice Wine Fair this weekend. But there's also a thread of all four of you taking the South African wine story into other parts of the world. And it chimes rather nicely with the Springboks having just won another Rugby World Cup. I think wine can rightfully take similar status, and that wine does so much for South Africa. When you get this kind of accolade, when somebody like Tim Atkin puts you firmly in the spotlight, it then allows you to just add a little nudge to your wine going into markets around the world and showcasing not just Middle East, not just Memento, but really showcasing South African wine.
Yeah, I think that to us, or to me, is the most important, because we try and tell the story about what we're doing in South Africa. And as a collective, I mean, like with the World Cup Rugby, it's never just one person or one winemaker or one farm. We are together. We are stronger together. And I think the South African wine industry is such an amazing family, because wherever we travel, whenever we travel, we do stand together, and it just makes everything so much more fun, and I think so much more stronger, and you have much more impact. So this, being the young winemaker of the year, makes it a little easier and makes the movement a little stronger and the wave a little bigger. And I am literally taking any opportunity and every opportunity that I can to spread the word of South African wine, because what we do in South Africa is unique, and we make super wines that have beautiful character and personality and soul. And I think that is very similar, and it speaks of South Africa. We don't try to copy other people or other countries. We make South African wine from South African vineyards grown in South African soil. And we as a whole of winemakers try and tell that story. And so that's what we do. We are stronger together in wine as well.
We are indeed, and it is something I love about this wine community, how closely knit our winemakers are, and how much support and genuine fondness there is, and admiration for each other exist in this space. At least one young winemaker of acclaim. There's another who's even younger, and that would be Kiara. And again, I don't think we've had you on the show, Kiara, since you went over to London. And I almost had to mute Kiara Scott mentions on my social media, because every second one was another person in the UK raving about having just discovered your wine and how marvelous they felt it was. What was that trip like? And how cool is it to be able to go into markets like the UK and have everybody sit up and take notice and go, whoa, Kiara, you're making some really good wine?
I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing to travel and share South African wines. And I echo what Marilee says. It's about getting the story out, telling people about the amazing wines that we make here and what's unique to South Africa. Yes, it's really fantastic, a fantastic experience. And I mean, we had a tasting at South African House, which was in the UK, which was just, I mean, I'm so humbled by that, to have been able to experience that. And the enthusiasm for South African wines as well it's amazing. Yes, it's quite overwhelming and humbling. Yeah.
And just it continues this terrific story, which we've told a couple of times on the show, is this adventure in wine has snowballed and snowballed and snowballed. Give us kind of your sense of of where you are now? And I know no winemaker will ever say that she or he has actually made it, because there are always new vintages to be made and new discoveries to be had. But if you do just take a step back and look over the last sort of 5 years or so, and this roller coaster you've been on, what's your sense of appraising what you've done and where you think you've got to today?
Dan, yes, so how can you ask me a question like that? But you know what? I'm still learning. I'm learning every day, and I think that's the beauty of wine. I don't think that you will ever make it, and that's why, or ever feel like you know everything. Every day I come to work, I really learn something new. So I'm really humbled by to have this opportunity to be able to do what I enjoy and what I love. I think if I chose again, I wouldn't choose anything else. So it's really just amazing that I get to come and do what I love to do. And I'm in a place and I have an opportunity where I can express myself. And just, I think, year on year, try to make the best wines that display this terroir. Yeah. I think I'm just blessed to be able to do what I can do, but I've definitely grown a lot. In wine, in communication skills, in speaking to people. It's just, I mean, it's so broad, but I'm blessed to be able to do what I love and learn every day.
And dazzling people everywhere. Lisa Harlow is watching the show. I was one of those people who met Kiara in London, says Lisa, but I did already know how good her wines are. Lisa, glad you got to catch up with Kiara, who's done plenty of traveling. So too has our star Zimbabwean. I'm not actually sure where you are at the moment, Tinashe, because it's normally in 8 states of America on the same day and then nipping into London and Milan on the way home. The traveling has been extraordinary over the last few years as you've taken this Kumusha brand of yours into the American market in particular, but a few others as well. What's the experience been like of hitting the road, of walking the streets of what seemed like every single town in America and introducing people to your wine?
No, thanks, Dan, for having me. I'm sure the shadows and the breakout kind of gives it away, right? I think we have to remind the powers that be that the Proteas are still in the World Cup, so they can spare us on the load shedding. No, yeah, man, Dan, it's been amazing. Like like a lot of strides that have been made. Again, it's been a learning journey. It's been quite rewarding, like representing the beautiful wines of South Africa outside of the country. And, for me, the question now is not about quality or any debate that the wines are just great. I think for me, I represent that kind of a wave who are out there sharing the beauty of wine, sharing the lifestyle about it, sharing the heritage, sharing the culture. And yeah, it gives me great joy. Like when I'm on travels, I'm Zimbabwean, but I represent South Africa. I represent South African wines. I represent the Western Cape, and it's just amazing unlocking those markets and sharing these beautiful wines we make with the rest of the world, especially in the American market.
And that American market has come up in conversations I've had over the last few weeks quite significantly as that market that is just so difficult to crack. The states are all different. What's allowed in one is not allowed in another. But you've also got a country where, if we're honest, South African wine is a very, very small speck on the market. What's your sense of South African wine becoming a little better known, of starting to penetrate the American market a little more, and how easy, how tough has it been for you to get Kumusha into the market?
Yeah, to be honest, Dan, it's really tough. If you look at the context, man, we're just a tiny drop there. And in my travels, you'd be surprised that some of the Americans don't even know where South Africa is. Try to explain where Sonderskloof is. Like, I literally have to pull up a map. And I once was visiting Wade in Sonderskloof and just like dropped a pin there. So whenever I'm in America, I have to open that pin and kind of say, this is where Sonderskloof is. But it's a challenging market. But what I love about it, if they love a product, if they feel its quality, they support, they recommend, they're willing to try different wines. That's what I love of them, about the American market. The only challenge is you gotta be there, you gotta pound the pavements. And for us, with the dollar, it's probably not the cheapest market to do visits in, but it's quite rewarding once you crack in and you get the people to drink the wine.
You're not the only traveller. I think all four of our guests have been travelling. With Samantha, though, it seems to be more of a classical Europe where I see tweets and messages popping up from. Samantha, welcome back onto the show. Lovely to have you with us. Where have your wine travels taken you in the course of 2023? And as per my question to Tinashe, what sort of an impact are you seeing, not just your own wine, but South African wine in general, have in these markets around the world?
Hi, Dan. Nice to be back. I think for me, the wines have actually headed out a lot quicker than I've managed to reach the markets. So I've got the wines now in China and Brazil. So the BRICS countries are doing quite well. But I haven't been able to visit China or Brazil yet for my own wines. But the UK as well, and I've got Sweden and Quebec. So export-wise has been fantastic. Most of my travels have been for more personal and soul reasons, such as Italy for good food and good wine. But in terms of my own brand getting out there, I need to play catch up and follow where the wines go to.
Whenever I travel, first thing I look for, whether it's on a wine list in a restaurant or I'm in a supermarket or a bottle store, I want to see South Africa and get that little buzz of pride when I do see some South African wine, sometimes surprised by what is actually there. Italy, I'd imagine I've spent quite a bit of time in France this year, a bit of time in Italy. South African wine was not something I saw a great deal of. Has it popped up in any of your travels, and are these places that we should be chasing down wine, or should we be happy with places like Brazil and China?
I think with Italy, that's a really tough one. I mean, they barely want to support the French wines, so getting South African wines into Italy is actually quite difficult. However, I was at a restaurant in Venice and I saw Craig Hawkins wines, Testa Longa, on a menu there in the middle of Venice, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. A small, natural wine producer in the heart of Venice at a well-known establishment there, which I thought really shows how far and how well respected South African wines have become, especially in a difficult country where they do make fantastic wines in Italy.
I think the chances of finding South African wine in France probably gone out the window after the World Cup result a couple of weeks ago, but nice to hear that they are in Italy. What about the wines that you are sending over? You make, as I said at the start, you make wine in a very exciting and adventurous manner, and there's a lot of stuff you make that's cool and very different to other winemakers, and all the better for it. What is it about the Vine Venom style and story that you think is ticking the right boxes and having this wine fly out to foreign shores for you?
I think I'm probably one of the slowest winemakers out there, which isn't really good for the cash flow. But in terms of style, I'm holding back a lot of the barrels myself. And because I release a lot of the wines non-vintage, they end up being a blend of a couple of years. So by the time they reach your glass, they've already been, even with the Chenin, up to 3 years in barrel, forming that non-vintage Solera system. So that's kind of the part of the style that I work with, is creating that consistency year after year. Non-vintage is not really a common thing unless it's either kind of here or there. It's either on really nice champagne or it's like box wine. So I'm trying to create wines that have that continuity, that kind of familiarity that you have year after year. So it means a lot of holding back in the winery and taking my time. I plan to release my Syrah 2021 this year, and I just thought, no, it's too young. I'm going to hold it back a little bit more. So it's kind of difficult to decide when to release the wines, but the non-vintage does really help with the blending and having those options in the winery. So still now I've got Chenin in barrel from 2020. I've got Carignan in barrel from 2021, aging under floor as well. So it makes my life easy that I can just leave them undisturbed and then go on holiday to Italy.
It's a dream life being a winemaker. I want to delve into those wines a little more slightly later on the show and see what people can be drinking if they head off to the Good Juice Wine Fair on Saturday. Kiara, the wine that you will be showing, I'd imagine, I'd hope people are going there, might include the taste of one of the more interesting wines I've been to a launch of in the last while, and that was your field blend. Something that a lot of South Africans still getting their heads around, maybe don't know so well. How's the field blend gone, and what's the response been from people to it?
Dan, people are loving the 16 or the field blend. 16 is the name of the wine. It's really been received very well. I think the concept is still a bit strange for some, or they're completely wowed by that. Wow, how can you have 16 different varieties in one wine? And then also, how can you farm 16 different varieties on a single vineyard block? So it's definitely for some people, they love it. They think it's fantastic, but I think the concept is still, they're still getting there a little bit. But then with others, they just completely absorb it and love it. But I think the wines are, at the moment, they're doing well. We're in the very fortunate position where most of it is sold out, actually. So I think this Saturday, if you do get a chance to taste it, then it's fantastic.
I'm going to push you a little further there just on some detail, because there might be a few people scratching their heads, field blend, 16 varieties. What on earth is going on here? Just give us the very basic entry level, even Dan can understand how a field blend comes about, but then also what it's like for you as a winemaker. Is this a nice put your feet up, well, it's doing the job itself kind of wine to make, or does it actually take a bit more effort?
So a field blend is, or interplanted field blend, like we've got at Brookdale. We've got 16 different varieties, all planted, interplanted. So you'll have, for example, Chenin, Marsanne, Roussanne, Grenache Blanc planted next to each other, or like that, in one single vineyard block. And our block is about 2 hectares in size. And that's basically a field blend. And from a winemaker's side, the first time we made the wine from that block was in 2021. And listen, it was the first time I'd ever worked with something like this. And because it was relatively young, the vineyard is quite young, we had some varieties that looked like it needed to be picked a week and a half ago, and other varieties that looked like they still needed to go through veraison a little bit. So it was quite tricky or challenging, but I welcome the challenge. And with the first vintage, we just picked everything together and made one wine. It was 2 barrels, and I think it went really well. And then now, as I'm beginning to understand and learn about the block a little bit more, obviously every season and vintage is different, so you have to harvest with the challenges of the season in mind, but it's getting better year on year. And I think the aim is that in the next 10 to 15 years, there's these different vines all planted next to each other. They're going to communicate to each other and hopefully ripen at the same time. I don't know if anybody's watched Fantastic Fungi, but the fungi will communicate to each other via the root system, and then the vines will go, Marsanne, you're ripening now, Pikpu or Petimansing, let's do it together, and they'll just make my life a lot easier. But at the moment, that's not the case. But that's the fun and the joys of winemaking.
It all sounds a little crazy and a little new age, but it does work, and that wine is only going to get better. It's a fascinating wine that not many people have had, and that applies to a lot of your wines, Marlies. If you flick through them, people go, I'd love to try a wine. She's the new young winemaker of the year, and they go, hang on, what on earth is a Grenache Gris? Or I know Chenin, but they're throwing in Verdelho. I thought he played for Real Madrid, and what are all these other wines? You've got a real flair for taking some of those grapes that we don't know quite so well, certainly in the mainstream market, and producing something incredibly special out of them. What drives you into this space? What prompts your selection of the grapes and the styles that you do make?
So they might sound or seem pretty unknown and maybe not mainstream varietals, but those are the grapes that are really better and, according to my wine beliefs, some of them best adapted to South African climate and to our soil and to our weather, and especially our climatic conditions when it comes to the low rainfall that we have here in the Western Cape. So Grenache Blanc, Grenache Gris, Grenache Noir, all three Grenaches. Then I also work with Portuguese grapes like Tinta Barocca and Verdejo. So they sound pretty crazy, but they are actually meant to grow in South Africa. So if we go back to, let's say, the 80s, we had lots of Grenache Blanc, not so much Grenache Gris, but we had Grenache Gris, we had Grenache Noir. So I think we went and ripped all our super well adapted grapes. We went and we ripped them all out, and then we went and we tried to make something that we thought was cool, like the French varietals. So we tried and we sort of wanted to chase fashion. So we all focused on things like Sauvignon, Bordeaux varietals, Pinot, Chardonnay. Those are very well adapted in a tiny area of South Africa. But for the rest of the Western Cape, it's pretty much warm and dry, and that's where the Grenaches come in. So I choose to not work the vineyards to do the work, so that I can just sort of naturally help them through the cellar. So I work with vineyards that grow in areas where they naturally thrive. So if you look at Grenache Gris, Blanc, and Noir, they love hot and dry regions. So I get most of my grapes from hot and dry Swartland area, some of them Bot River, which is also pretty hot and dry, even though it's a little bit cooler. So for me, it's about working with a core or ingredient that's already sort of 90% there. And that's why I work with the Grenaches and the Tintas and the Verdejos. High acid, low pHs, sounds a bit wine geeky, but that is what we need to make proper sort of, world-class, whatever that word is. But if we want to make real wines, we need to have the plant not stress as much. So that's what I choose to work with, and that's where my it might sound weird grapes come from, but according to me, that's the grapes that work well in South Africa.
Anybody who's ever tasted any of your wine will agree, and I see Ronaldo, my producer, very excitedly saying that your Tinta Barocca is one of his favorite wines. He's, of course, Portuguese, so he's completely subjective, but he does love the wine, as do we all. How does then that spill into the educational process for us South African wine drinkers? We know, for instance, people who make Sauvignon Blanc might have a 10% splash of Semillon in it, but they're generally reluctant to throw that on because it's a term that people don't know so well. Let's just stick to Sauvignon Blanc. Particularly now you've got this great acclaim from Tim Atkin. Your wines are getting better and better known. Do you think South Africans are now starting to become more familiar with the grapes with which you work and understand not just, well, they're not weird, they're actually really cool, and they're making some seriously good wine?
Yes, I mean, I started, my first winemaking job was in 2007 at Beaumont Wines in Bot River. And back then, people didn't drink Chenin. So if we hear Chenin now, everybody wants to drink it, or at least 90% of people know Chenin, they love Chenin, they drink Chenin. In 2007, very few people drank Chenin. So I think it's a slow process, and we these days want to have it sort of instant success or instant fame for these varietals. But if you look at the Chenins back in 2007, when I worked in the tasting room as a young girl, and people only wanted to have Sauvignon. So I gave them Chenin and said it was Sauvignon. So they loved it. So that was my sort of route into showing people that Chenin is actually as good as Sauvignon Blanc in South Africa, if not better, in most or in some areas. So I have to be patient when I show these grapes, and I have to tell the story every day to as many people as I can, and eventually, slowly with time, people will understand it. But there's no forcing or instant, success with these varietals. I mean, whatever success is, I love making it, I love drinking it, and I think there is a big place for well-adapted grape varietals in South Africa.
It certainly is. I'm in two minds. The envious, the jealous person doesn't want you to get better known, because it's hard enough to get your wines as it is, Marlies. And I think that's only going to continue. Lisa Harlow saying the Memento Grenache is just superb, up there with some of the best Grenache in the world. And I think that is a very, very accurate statement indeed. Samantha, the varietals you make can also be something left of center, but also the approach, whether it's using floor or using wines from across different vintages. Run us through the philosophy that has directed you to where you find yourself today, and why you feel it's working so well for you.
Yeah, so I think I have kind of a backwards approach compared to most people, and how a winemaker would decide to find a vineyard and then start working with that vineyard and figure out what the vineyard gives you. I kind of worked backwards and worked with wines that I've tasted from around the world, and then interpret that into South Africa and figured out, how can I interpret this rosé that I've tried from Rioja, and how can I make that here in South Africa? So it's not exactly copy and paste, and it's never going to be like that. It's just taking inspiration from the wines that I've had. And I'm not a technical winemaker. I never studied at a university. So the way that I've learned is from tasting and basically trial and error. Many trials. So the non-vintage also helps with continuing the style of the wine year after year, especially for the consumer too. I thought it was quite an interesting approach for people to be able to have a Chenin from Vine Venom, and year after year you have that familiarity with the style of the wine. And practically speaking, in the winery, it's also because a lot of the wines, like the rosé, the Carignan, and the Chenin for the silence wine, are aged under floor. So practically I'm adding fresh wine each year to the barrels to keep that floor alive. So stylistically, it's practical, and it's also for the kind of the market to understand that style of wine too. So that's how I've started Vine Venom, and kind of learned along the way as well. The reception to the wines has been fantastic. I think the natural wine scene in South Africa is so new, it's so growing, and people are learning about these different grape varieties that they've not heard of. My rosé is Touriga Nacional, so another Portuguese grape, and Carignan. And I started working with those grapes basically because it was all that I could get in the Swartland. So I'm quite far behind the other Swartland winemakers who have been quite established here, and they've got into the nice Grenache like Marlies or the Cinsault or the old vineyards. So for me, starting out, I was looking for vineyards that I could really work with, and they're young vineyards, but it allows me the opportunity to grow as they grow, and as the vineyards develop and year after year, see what they give me. So I've learned a lot already in the last few years working with the vineyards that I do, and what I get from them year after year as well.
I want to ask you a technical question, but a simple answer for the non-winemaking community. We've a couple of times mentioned underfloor. There may be some people imagining that at the bottom of your cellar there's a large trapdoor, and then you go under the floor, and that is where you make your wine. That wouldn't, of course, be correct. What exactly is floor? What does this mean in the simplest of terms?
So you're actually not far off how it is at the winery. My barrels are stored in the far away corner, away from everybody else's barrels, but that's the way that I like it. So basically, floor yeast is a thin layer of yeast that grows on top of the wine. So I don't fill the barrels to the top. So most normal, sane winemakers will fill the barrel to the top and then put the bung in, and it's basically sealed off, it's protected from oxygen. But what I do is I leave headspace in the barrel, and after about 6 weeks, if I'm lucky, maybe 8 weeks, a natural veil of floor yeast grows on top of that wine. And like any yeast, it's eating away at sugar. So it's making the wine drier, more saline, more savory, a lot more umami flavors. So with my Chenin Blanc, it's not that tutti fruity kind of tropical flavors. It's really leaning towards the more mineral salty style. So it's a little bit of a chance, it's a little bit of a risk, because I don't inoculate, I don't encourage this yeast at all. I just wait. So right before I went to Italy in July, my Carignan barrels hadn't developed a floor. I was gone for a month. I came back and the floor had developed. So it's a really kind of out of control way. I mean, I know a lot of winemakers are super technical and precise. This is a very out there method, very risky, and you don't know really what you're going to end up with. But so far the results have been fantastic. With the rosé, for example, I think I'm the only person aging wine rosé on the floor. It's not even really a common thing internationally to do, but it gives the wine a lot more texture, a lot more roundness. And I think rosé, it's such an interesting category. You know, in South Africa, it's kind of been sidelined as like a swimming pool wine, and people just put ice cubes in the glass. So I'm trying to show a little bit more of a serious side to rosé, and working with really good vineyards that are farmed properly. The wines are made low intervention in terms of natural fermentation, you know, no filtering, really low sulfurs. But adding a little bit of that kind of uniqueness with the floor, which gives it a different personality and style as well.
There we go. If you weren't sure what floor was, you now have the perfect explanation. And it's a style not often used, but used very successfully by Samantha. The third of our three winemakers. Our fourth guest is kind of straddles the world between making wine, distributing, and understanding it. And for you, Tinashe, the understanding of the wine that you're taking to market will come not just from your own experience, your own preferences, the own wine you've had fun with, but also from having served so much wine to people at some of the best restaurants in the country. How has your experience with seeing what people have been drinking at places like the Test Kitchen influenced what you've decided to put to market as your Kumusha wines?
Yeah, it's quite interesting that the way I've built my wine and my wine brand is purely from my experience, and mostly working in the Test Kitchen, like you mentioned, working in the restaurant. So unlike Kiara and Marilis, I'm more leaning towards to Sam. I don't have a winemaking background, and I come from the other side of the spectrum. You know, understanding taste, understanding style, understanding food on the table, and that's where I formulated my kind of wine style that I put with Kumusha. So you find out that I have 9 different wines. Ones which I call my lifestyle range. You know, it's just super, have fun, enjoy. Then there are wines that are modeled by my own taste and working in the restaurant and food, like my Flame Lily. And there are wines in the mid-tier, you know, which are kind of influenced with vineyards I like working with, vineyards I was introduced to and fell in love with, like the Saunders Kloof down in where the two oceans meet. So for me, just like the person I am, I'm kind of versatile and not boxed in one similar style. I think I've got the experience in kind of conceptualizing the taste and the style of wine that I want, then go and find the vineyards that I can work with, and almost like bring that wine to the table or to any occasion. So I think for me also, I don't do plenty wine events, wine functions, because I think the brand kind of gets lost in a way. The reason I like the good juice and I'm pouring my wine there is just like the name itself says it, you know, it's just good juice. And I'm hoping the crowd which comes there are just there to have a good time, good experience, taste something they like and be like, okay, I really like this good juice, or this is not my style. You know, we're not trying to be very geeky and going into the Cabernet Sauvignon or pH and you know, the different soil types. So I kind of feel that's where sometimes us wine professionals lose the wine drinking public. So for me, why I'm on the good juice is because I'm going to pour good juice and I just want people to enjoy and have fun.
And that they will certainly do, but they'll have fun within the context of learning and understanding and discovering. Something we picked up at WineX last week was where in the past it might have had an element of the beer festival attendee. People have paid their money and just want to have as much wine as they can drink through the course of the evening. Instead, last week we were finding people not just taking their time to seek out particular stands and particular wines, but asking, have you got a white wine? And so they wanted to know, have you got a skin contact white? Have you got any vintage reds? The wine audience, I'm getting the sense, Tinashe, in South Africa, is becoming a lot more discerning. Does that reflect in the experiences that you've been having of late?
Yeah, definitely so. I think the wine education has been tremendous, and it goes down to, you know, we're having a lot of wine professionals in restaurants, wine professionals in wine tasting clubs, and just like the just average drinker has been curious. I know a lot of guys who are into, you know, they're doing law, practicing law, or they're in some other industry, but they tell you, you know what, I'm doing a WSET course or I'm doing a Cape Wine Academy course. because naturally they just want to learn more. So in that regard, there's been a lot of strides, and it makes it makes our jobs easier, and it makes it much more two-way. So you're not talking in Greek every time, you're getting the understanding, and we just continue to share the information, continue to teach. And I think it's also important for us to be at these events and really pouring the wines ourselves. I think it goes a long way.
Has a huge impact. Again, referencing WineX from last week, people seeing the winemakers really does create a connection with the wine itself. Just a quick one on your fellow countrymen. I was talking to Zimbabweans last week who were very proudly telling me about some Kumusha wine that they have been drinking. I know you represent South Africa when you are traveling, but there's also a pretty strong Zimbabwean diaspora that I suspect is not just very proud of the Kumusha story, but is quite excited to be able to drink the wine of Tinashe Nyamudoka.
Yeah, exactly. Like Kumusha, the meaning of it is like your roots, your home, your origins. And for me, that was the whole essence about wine. Wine is about history, tradition, culture, and food. And as much as I adopted the South African culture and the food and the wine, I always felt that there was a need for me to really represent my culture, be it my country. And so I kind of feel they resonate in that way. Same as the rest of Africa, that they've got a wine that embodies their culture and brings their food on the table.
There are plenty of great wines on show. If you're Zimbabwean and you're heading off to the Good Juice Wine Fair, then Tinashe is your man for a cultural touch point on top of some great wine. Maralise, for people who are coming along this weekend, are going to go and try the wine. What's the starting point? If you've never had the magic that is Maralise in a bottle, what would your first glass be? What are you anticipating as you begin your memento adventure?
Geez, man, if you can finish a bottle of wine in one day, or in one evening, then I think you've made the right wine. So I think you can finish all of my wines in one evening. So, but I would suggest, I make quite light, delicate red wines. So if you want to sort of enter the red wine drinking sort of arena, these wines are light, but they're complex. So they've got personality, and it's basically like the vineyard in the bottle. And so you connect to all of the wines that I make, and the reds are usually lighter and easier to drink, even though they're super complex and they've got massive stories to tell. They're not heavy. They're not massive in tannin. They're not alcoholic. And with the whites, just character, just beautiful sort of volume, rich but fresh, light, vibrant, soulful wine. So pick anyone, and finish the bottle. Otherwise, I'll be very disappointed.
I don't think we need any encouragement there at all. Just quickly, as we look to the horizon, anything new, exciting, different we can expect from you? What's on the cards coming up from Memento?
Well, I am a little bit of a Grenache freak, so I can't help myself when it comes to new vineyards and new styles and new soils and new anything that goes with Grenache. So my 2022 Grenaches will be released in 4 different wines. So we'll have a bit of new labels with new vineyards, new soils. But that's for next year. I would say it will be about April, May. I'll release all of that. And then always experimenting with some new grapes, a little bit of Jura, but those are still secrets. But for now, the Grenache, instead of having just one Grenache, there'll be 4 different Grenaches. One from, maybe I shouldn't say now. So many different Grenaches, all from different sites and different soil types.
You heard Lisa Harlow earlier commending Maralise on the quality of her Grenache. 4 of them, they just can't help themselves, these winemakers, can they? And we benefit as a result. We might have to have a very special Grenache show when all 4 of those touch down. Samantha, what about you? What are you working on at the moment? What are you going to be dazzling us with in the next little while?
Yeah, so at the Juice Fair, it's actually going to be my first time showing my wines up in Joburg. So it's kind of like a little launch up there for me in Johannesburg. So I'm really looking forward to sharing my wines up there. And I'm actually going to have all of the wines available that I've been working on over the last few years, so all 6 of them. And like Marilee said, you try to just stick yourself to, you know, certain wines, and then you come up with more ideas or more vineyards come your way. So I'm kind of playing around in the winery a lot with the rosé barrels. I want to do some sun wines, some Maderizing of the barrels. So some crazy stuff happening there. But at Juice, I'm really looking forward to showing off all the wines that I've currently got available. So all 6 for the first time.
It is a real treat for Johannesburg. If you haven't had Venom yet, the first proper show. It's taken us a while to persuade Samantha to come up to Johannesburg. I'm glad it is finally happening. And then as we look ahead beyond this weekend, I know there's always a sense of invention to all of our winemakers, but I suspect particularly so with Venom. Is there anything new that's coming up soon, and are you allowed to tell us about it?
Gosh, this is the busy time of the year where there's so much going on. And I mean, Cape Town's obviously close to us here in the Western Cape, so there's going to be pop-ups and tastings happening there. And then before we know it, harvest here starts in the Swartland mid-January. So we get to the busiest time of the year then. But in terms of the new releases, as I mentioned, I've got that Syrah that I've already bottled, and I'm just kind of waiting for it to age a little bit in the bottle until I feel like it's going to be ready. But it's probably one of those things you're never going to feel like it's ready. So I just got to take the plunge. And my new Skin Contact was released this year, so I'll also be showing that up in Johannesburg. So that was only 550 bottles, 2 barrels of that. So that was the start of the first of the non-vintage releases. So that's kind of really interesting to see how that wine is developing in barrel and starting out that process of the non-vintage Solera system as well.
Again, if you haven't tried Venom, Johannesburg, this Saturday is your chance at Acid Wine Bar. Tinashe, the Kumusha lineup, you've already given us a pretty good indication of what is there. Do you face the same challenge as so many of our winemakers of knowing when to decide enough is enough and resisting the temptation to add something else to the list because you know it'll be really cool if you do?
Oh yeah, man. There's a lot of things coming through. To be honest, I'm in the coming year. I have a pet nut that I've been working with a co-winemaker as well. It's coming through, and yeah, I'm bottling also a Carignan this year. So it will be released next year. And another exciting project that I'm going to embark is, you know, I figure it's going to be difficult to make wine in Zimbabwe. But this year I'm making some, I'll be crushing some apples. So I've already sent some wine barrels from Cape Town to Nyanga. So in the coming year, look forward for a nice fermenting cider from Kumusha coming from the Claremont apples in Nyanga.
I was going to ask you about the Zimbabwe project because I know that you were looking at some land up there and a country that has probably Mukuyu and Green Valley as its 2 prominent wines. Could definitely do with some new ones. And what about the adventures, Tinashe? Because you have spent so much time on the road getting the brand out there. It's always difficult when you've got a young family and getting that juggle right. Are you able to take your foot off the accelerator a little, or is there still plenty of the world for Tinashe to see?
No, there's plenty more. This is my life. It's not work. It's my lifestyle. So if I'm not doing anything interesting, I die. So I've still got energy. I'm still young. I'm still ambitious. I'm still courageous. And there's a lot to share. There's lots to learn, and there's lots of glasses, wine glasses to.
And Tinashe will be filling those very happily indeed, including ones this Saturday at the Good Juice Wine Fair at Acid Wine Bar. Kiara, we mentioned the field blend, and I'm already tempted to open the 1 bottle I have left this evening. That's just one of several for people who haven't had Brookdale wine before, and if so, what have you been doing? If they are going to be drinking this weekend, what's the best introduction to the wines of Kiara Scott if they are dropping in at Acid on Saturday?
I think the best introduction would be to start with our Mason Road range. We've got a Rosé, a Chenin Blanc, a Syrah, and the Southern Rhone inspired red, so it's GSM. But the M, generally GSM means Grenache, Syrah, and Mourvedre, but in our case it means Grenache, Syrah, and miscellaneous.
That's best wine name of the year, Kiara.
Yeah. No, we're very original. So I think that would be a great introduction, and then you could try the 16 after that. And then we've also just released our Bradbourne, which is a Southern Rhone inspired white blend of Grenache Blanc, Marsanne, Roussanne, and Picpoul Blanc, which is really exciting. We only made about 1,000 bottles last vintage in 2022, yes, so that would be quite interesting. And then coming up, we've got a lot of exciting things happening. Next year we'll do our first harvest of the 20, which is a 20 varietal interplanted whitefield blend, and I think that's it for now. That's all I'm going to share.
I think that is more than enough. It's also more than enough reason to come back and visit, because I haven't done so for a little while, not just for your wines, which are obviously the star attraction, but I'm hearing more and more people, Kiara, giving me rave reviews about a meal that they have had at the estate. Yeah. And that's becoming a really big part of what you guys do at Brookdale.
Yes, indeed. So February of this year, we opened the bistro at Brookdale, and it's been absolutely fantastic. Chef Gary Kutsia is magic. He's magical. He makes it very hard for me to eat anywhere else. So he's doing amazing things with his team at the bistro. And then we've also opened up our tasting room as well. So please come and visit us in Paarl.
We shall do so with great pleasure. Visit you in Paarl, come down and visit Samantha to look under her floors, head down to the Bothra area and Team Memento, and then probably have to go to Louisiana or Texas or Wisconsin or somewhere like that to go and find Zimbabwe's premier wine traveling salesman, wherever he is around the world. However, you can find the wines and Samantha and Tinashe on Saturday if you head to the Good Juice Wine Fair at Acid Wine Bar. There's also going to be some terrific food. The DJ's playing. It just looks like an awful lot of fun, led by some terrific wine. Guys, lovely having all of you on the show, all in such exciting wine spaces. And great to share it with you. And Marlies, congratulations once again, wine royalty on the show, and well done for a very, very well-deserved accord. Although I suspect Kiara and Samantha might be chasing you down on that one before too long. And Tinashe, we're just waiting for the sequel to Blind Ambition. You're a movie star now as well as everything else. So we need another film to come out. So get working on that one. Guys, thank you so much. Best of luck on Saturday. Lovely to have such terrific wine and wine that's sometimes a little off the radar here in Johannesburg, finding a really welcome home. So thank you for that. Keep making terrific wine. And thank you for celebrating with me on the show this evening.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dan.
There we go. Kiara Scott, Marlies Nyamudoka, Samantha Suddons, and Tinashe Nyamudoka together with the wines of Memento, of Brookdale, of Kumusha, and also the wines of Vine Venom. And Paul Closer, I think we'll take that as a good sign and pour just a single glass of wine up. I think I'll go and pour myself one of those now. The tickets are available at Quicket if you would like to head over. I'm not sure there are too many left, so I'd do it rather quickly if I were you. Some lovely wine that's been poured alongside great food and some terrific music as well. So that's Saturday, if you're in Johannesburg, Acid Wine Bar, with all four of our wine brands today featuring in a tremendous lineup. That does it for today. I'm going to go and light a fire. The weather is revolting in Johannesburg today. It's about 5 degrees now. It's still drizzling, and we've already had a couple of hailstorms. So I'm going to go and take refuge in a fire, open a nice bottle of wine, and prepare myself for the rest of a wine drinking week. Don't forget, in 2 weeks' time, Tuesday, the 14th of November, you'll be able to join us at the Dan Really Likes Wine charity auction. And a big thank you to both Tinashe and Kiara, who are amongst those who have donated some lots for that auction. We look forward to seeing you there. If you'd like to come and join us, tickets will be available from tomorrow at Norman Goodfellows as we raise money for the Cape Winemakers Guild Trust, the Pinotage Youth Development Academy, as well as Reach for a Dream. I'll be back with a show on Thursday, live from Ellerman House and the brand new Villa Fonte Series C. Winemaker Christa Fries will join me from Ellerman House before I head off to conduct and host the Art Angels auction for 2023. So do join us. The Villa Fonte becomes more iconic with every passing year, and it's a big week too because it's Mike Radcliffe's birthday today. So happy birthday to Mike. Big thank you to 4 wonderful guests for joining me on the show. Thanks for joining us out there, wherever you are. This is Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. We'll see you on Thursday. Goodbye.